Welcome to our presentations. Our topic is going to be the effect of in-class debates on argumentation skill in second language educations. First, let's take a look at our team member, including 6 members, me, Diệp, Đạt, Dương, Đức, and Bảo. So, our topic is divided into 7 main parts, including introductions, theoretical background, methodology, result, discussion and implication, limitations of the study, and the final one is conclusions. For the first part, which is introduction. Now let's take a look at the overview of this study. For the first part, which is the importance of critical thinking and argumentation, the ability to reason critically and argue effectively is considered as one of the most fundamental skills for success in everyday life, academic and professional careers. Generating and evaluating arguments is a key indicator of good critical thinking ability, and this skill enables people to verify information, consider alternative viewpoints, and produce counter-arguments. For the next part is the problem and challenges. However, we are currently facing a pressure issue. Numerous studies express concern about students with argumentative ability in the first language, which is also known as L1, and the second language, which is also known as L2. And here we also have some empirical evidence. L1 argumentation skill often don't transfer adequately to L2. So as a result, weaknesses in academic performance and career prospect happened. So what exactly caused this deficiency? Research has pointed to 3 primary barriers. The first one is lack of effective instruction. This is the leading cause. The issue is not that students are incapable of learning. It is that they are not being equipped with clear strategy and pedagogical tools specifically designed to develop argumentation. And the next is cultural factors. In certain cultures, such as those influenced by Confucianism, the authoritative role of the teacher may inadvertently discourage students from practicing questioning, criticizing or debating elements vital for argumentation. And the last one is limited L2 proficiency. When language proficiency is low, students find it is very difficult to articulate complex ideas, leading them to avoid using sophisticated components of arguments altogether. So here are some research about research context and solution. In light of these challenges, we require a proactive pedagogical solution. We propose that in-class debates is an ideal tool. Debate for students to search for and evaluate credible evidence, identify and overcome their personal biases, and actively respond to and assess inconsistencies in an opponent's arguments. So let me point out some argument in this part. The first argument is seeking pedagogical tools that promote student ability to reason with critical thinking and argue with credible evidence is an urgent overarching activity. Premises 1 here is deficiencies in argumentation skill haven't been linked to the lack of adequate and effective instruction. And the next premise is These deficiencies are not linked to the inherent inability of students to acquire such skill, and therefore fighting to that enhance critical reasoning and evidence-based argumentation is an urgent priority. And this argument passed the true proper form test and it's also valid. For next argument, culture is a notable variable that can interfere with argumentation performance in L2. The first premise in non-Western societies like those dominated by Confucianism culture, teachers are viewed as authority figures who cannot be challenged or criticized by students. And premise two, this authoritative structure reduces the power distribution, discourage students from speaking up, challenging teachers, and developing argumentation, and therefore, cultural context is a factor that hinders L2 argumentation performance. And for this argument, it's also passed the true proper perform test, and it is also valid. And the final argument in this, in my part, in-class debate is a potentially effective and pedagogical tool to have improved learner reasoning and argumentative skill. The first premise is the debate process offers one of the best mechanisms for operationalizing and applying the principle of critical thinking. The next one is debate for students to actively search, inspect, and evaluate arguments. And premise three, debates have students overcome personal prejudice and biases, identify inconsistencies in opponents' reasoning, and engineer well-thought persuasive arguments. Therefore, in-class debates is a highly effective method for enhancing L2 learner argumentative competition. And this argument is also passed the true proper form test and it also valid. Okay, for the next part, Ziep will introduce to all of you guys.
Our first theoretical perspective comes from dialogic argumentation, which has its roots in the everyday social practice of talk. This form of argumentation is widely regarded as an essential pathway for fostering individual argumentative reasoning. We have premise one. Reasoning is fundamentally dialogical. Therefore, its development is best supported in social dialogical settings where learners interact and engage in meaningful discussion. Premise two, dialogic argumentation engage students in social negotiations, which allow them to identify strength and weakness of their argument. Through this process, they can refine and improve their reasoning. Uh, Premise three, long interaction theory explains that learners become aware of shortcomings in their input and modify their output accordingly. Applied to argumentation, this means students experience a processing cycle that draw attention to reasoning tasks and encourage reflection and revision of their argumentative skills. So, conclusions, therefore, the theory suggests that dialogic argumentation promotes the development of student argumentative reasoning by providing opportunities for interaction, reflection, and iterative improvement. Or our second theoretical perspective focuses on the conceptualization of argumentation, especially the distinction between learning to audio and auditing to learning. We have premise one in the learning to audio conceptualization. Students are ex- explicitly taught how to audio by learning the components of argumentation. Here, arguing is seen as an in itself a premise to in contrast the arguing to learn perspective conceptualize argumentation as a means to rationally resolve questions, issues, and disputes, or and to solve problems. Next, our premise is Hilbert in 2017 further argues that orientation empowers learners to think beyond the structure of argument and foster analytical and critical thinking. Moreover, it encourages students to view orientation as a process, not a product, emphasizing ongoing reasoning and reflection. So, in conclusion, therefore, this story suggests that debate aligns with the arguing to learn perspective and is therefore likely to enhance student argumentative competence by developing both reasoning and critical thinking. Next, we turn to empirical research on debate and argumentation. Uh, Several studies have reported improvements in the argumentative skill of students who participated in debate. The first premise is Norwich and Webb in 2016 beyond course or evaluation and instructor observation for uh, unanimous agreement among social study and history teachers that debate activity and enhance student ability to write arguments supporting claims that valid reasoning and relevant evidence. Premise two is American university student in a debate integrated part produce far more arguments and stronger support in their final essays compared to students in a court without debate. So, therefore, this study indicates that debate enhance student argumentative skills. Um, Our main argument is that debate improves student argumentative skill and support L2 or foreign language development. The first premise is debate enhances our student argumentative skill, and the next premise is debate also support L2 language development. Or Chappell and Curtis in 2000 notes that improvement in analytic and critical thinking in a second or foreign language can lead to improvements in overall language skills. Therefore, debate not only strengthen our argumentative skill but also support L2 or foreign language development. In this study, we aim to examine how debate affect L2 student argumentative competence. We have a sub-element to get a reliable picture of a student's skill. It is crucial to assess both the structural components and quality aspect of their argument. The first premise is stress, the stress the need to analyze both structure and quality to understand learners' reasoning competence. Premise two is the surface structure or shells of the argument may appear appropriate or even exemplary, but the actual substance could still be exceedingly good. This highlights that structural analysis alone is not sufficient. Therefore, a proper assessment framework that considers both structure and substance is necessary to determine whether debate truly improve or alter student orientation skill. And finally, our main argument is that debate intervention help alter students produce better, more complex, and higher quality arguments. Our premise one is a proper assessment framework that evaluates both structure and substance. We review where the debate improve alter student orientation skill. The next premise is learner verbal and written arguments differ in complexity, so both oral and written outputs must be considered. The last premise is previous research provide evidence that debate enhance argumentation skills, supporting the effectiveness of debate intervention. So in conclusion, therefore, implementing the best intervention in L2 classroom can help students produce more sophisticated, sophisticated or higher quality arguments, both orally or in writing. Uh, that will present the next part.
Okay, so the first part is design and participants. So in this part, I found one argument is our study adopted a quasi-experimental post-test control group design. This design was necessary to compare the effects of an intervention on a student argumentative, writing, and speaking ability. So there are four premises. The premise one is the intervention group participate in 10 debates, each lasting 15 minutes per week. They did not receive uh, instruction on argumentation structure or quality. The second premise is we work with 8 classes from 3 secondary schools, 5 intervention class with 96 pupils, and 3 control class with 51 pupils. The third premise is student English proficiency range from B1 to B2 level. And the last premise is both groups receive regular English lesson with 2 or 3 15-minute sessions per week. And for the conclusions, is the quasi-experimental pretest post-test is necessary and help us capture changes attributable to the intervention. So to the second part is the intervention. At this part, I found one argument is the intervention was debated based and built on validated debate tasks. Two format were used: group debate, 2 for 2 against, and 1-to-1 debates. Each debate considered a constructive speech, rebuttal, and clash. So the first premise is the intervention student who participate in 10 debates were informed at least 1 week in advance of the debate topic. The second premise is they were allowed to choose the topics that interested them and the side they wanted to defend. The premise number 3 is the student in the intervention group, which is who is in different school, were allowed to choose topics. Their reading were not exactly the same. So this also applies to the student in the control group who were allowed to choose their own articles. And the last premise, the intervention students also wrote persuasive essays and later. However, in order to not to disadvantage the control student in terms of the amount of practice and the argumentative discourse, we allowed them to write more essay and letter. And the conclusion of this part is the control group wrote on average 2 more essays and 1 more letter than the intervention group. Additionally, the control groups read and summarized 3 more articles. So for this part, I found one argument is analyzed and compared to written and to oral text, argumentative opinion text produced by the intervention and control groups during pre and post text. So premise number 1, as to writing text, we selected 2 controversial topics. Capital punishment should be legalized and abortion should be banned. Premise number 2, to evaluate the student oral arguments, we employ semi-unplanned opinions tags involving different topics which were randomly assigned to student. The premise number 3, the students received 7 minutes to prepare and write down any notes they wishes to use in their oral opinion. So conclusion, a free writing opinion task which is not governed by any particular writing conventions would allow students to focus more on argument and their articulation. Free opinion tags are likely to provide a more fine-grained picture of student use of counter-argument and rebuttal than essays seen our students were already instructed before the intervention to compose two-side essay. To this part, argument structure analysis, I found 2 arguments. The first argument is argument structure model. The premise number 1, Tolman's model is widely accepted and used and has been shown to relate to argumentative writing qualities. The second premise is the model needed adaptation, reducing or modifying its feature to accommodate the structural variation that are encountered in the arguments composed by So to the second premise, the model needed adaptation, reducing or modifying its features to accommodate the structural variation that are encountered in the argument composed by L2 secondary school students in this study. To the conclusion, Tolman's model of argumentation was adapted but required modification. And the second argument is to accept the overall complexity and structural sophistication of the argumentation presented in each text. We developed the classification scheme that classifies texts in terms of the structural complexity of argumentation's pattern. The premise number one, the ability to use rebuttals in the most complex skill, as it requires integrating an original and an alternative theory. The second premise is rebuttals demonstrate a higher level capability with argumentation. Therefore, texts consisting of rebuttals will accord a high score in the complexity framework. So, to the argument and quality analysis, I found one argument is to accept the quality of each production. We developed a 5-point rating scale comprising a set of items that tap into different aspects of the reasoning quality, including organization, sufficiency, clarity, elaboration, relevant, persuasiveness, and addressing the opposing view, in addition to holistically assessing the overall quality of each production. The first premise, argument increase in quality as they become increasingly organized, sufficient, clear, elaborated, relevant, persuasive, and address the opposing view. The second premise, in developing this quality-oriented evaluation framework, we drew heavily on coding schemes developed and validated by Keane and Karabakh and Ferretti et al. And the last premise, in Appendix D, we have provided an example of the scoring procedure for two written tests. So therefore, for comprehensive evaluation of the argumentative competence, the quality of the student-generated argument needs to be assessed. So to the iterator reliability part, I found one argument, identify elements of arguments and calculated their frequency. Premise number one, the first two authors first went through practice session, scoring some text, and then compare scores and discuss the discrepancy to clarify and standardize, calibrate the interpretation of coding. After the practice session, the first author coded the entire data set. Next, a random sample of 25% was checked by the second author, who was not involved in carrying out the intervention and data collection and was applied for condition. Next, the third author and research assistant coded the quality aspect of the data. After the practice session, The first author and a research assistant independently score a randomly selected sample of 25% of data, or both written and oral argument. Both written and oral argument. The premise number 4, after resolving the disagreement, and research assistant who was unaware of the data source scored the remaining data. Therefore, perform a structural analysis of the written and oral argument produced. And the last statistical analysis part, I found one argument, which is as our participants came from different classes within different schools, our data were structured hierarchically. The first premise, we therefore apply multi-level linear models, MLM. We used a two-level hierarchical linear model to account for the multi-level data structure with students nested within classes. Next, we model the independent variable time and condition as fixed effects and random variation across student and clustered as random effects. Next, we need to take into account the combined effect of both main factors. And last, we need to focus on interaction of time pre versus post and group intervention versus control group. So therefore, we limit ourselves to reporting interaction. So for the next part, Dương will introduce everyone.
So in this part, I will explain the results of the study and focusing on two main areas: the structure of students' arguments and the quality of their arguments. So let's come with the structural analysis. So this part shows descriptive statistics for both written and oral arguments. And so first we have the sub-argument 1, focus on basic argument elements. And the first premise is one comment needs to be made on the basis of these statistics. The participants in both groups seem to have the tendency to heavily rely on the fundamental elements of argument structure in defending their positions. And the second premise, the other secondary arguments elements was used less frequently, especially in the oral arguments. And the conclusion for the first sub-arguments is, therefore, the participants' arguments rely mainly on basic structural elements. And for sub-argument 2, this is focused on the method of analysis. And the premise number 1, to answer the first question about the impact of the debate intervention on the structural elements of the participants' argumentations, we conduct MLM analysis, and it stands for multi-level modeling. And the second premise for sub-argument 2 is to estimate the magnitude of the difference between the intervention and control groups. We use Cohen's effect sign when significant differences were observed. And the conclusion is, therefore, MLM analysis with effect size are appropriate to assess to the impact of the debate intervention. And next we have the sub-argument number 3. This look at the written arguments, and we also have two premises. And the first one is the debate intervention appears to have an impact on a number of structural elements of the participants' written arguments. And the second premise say that MLM
revealed that students in the intervention group significantly improved in overall complexity, use of data, sub-arguments, counter-arguments, rebuttals, qualifiers, and backings. And these improvements were statistically significant with moderate to large effect size. And the conclusion for sub-argument number 3 is, therefore, the debate intervention improves multiple structural components in written argumentation. And the final sub-argument for this argument is sub-argument number 4, focus on oral arguments. So this only have one premise, that is, student improve in complexity, data, sub-arguments, warrants, counter-arguments, and rebuttals. And some of these had large effect size, meaning the inventions had a strong impact. And the conclusion for sub-argument number 4 is, therefore, the debate intervention improved multiple structural components in oral argumentation. And bringing this all together, the main argument for structural analysis we have is we have 4 premises. That is the conclusion of 4 sub-arguments. The first one is the participants' arguments rely mainly on basic structural elements. Premises number 2 is MLM analysis with effect size are appropriate to assess the impact of the debate intervention. The third one is the debate intervention improves multiple structural components in written argumentation. And the fourth one is the debate intervention improves multiple structural components in oral argumentation. And the conclusion for this main argument is therefore the debate interventions has a positive impact on the structural elements of participants' argumentation overall. And moving on, let's look at the argument quality. And first, we also have a sub-argument. And the first premise is MLM used to check whether the intervention affected argument quality. And the second premise is the result in tables 9 and table 10 for written and oral arguments. And the conclusion for this part is, therefore, MLM analysis was used to evaluate whether the intervention affected argument quality. And the next is sub-argument number 2, where this sub-argument look at the written arguments. And the premises are that the intervention groups improve from pre-test to protest in organization, clarity, elaboration, relevance, and persuasiveness. And all improvements have moderate to a large effect size. And the conclusion for this is, therefore, the debate intervention improves multiple quality aspects of written argumentation. And sub-argument number 3 we have is focused on oral arguments. And the inventions group outperform the control group in almost all measures: overall assessment, organization, sufficiency, clarity, elaboration, relevance, and persuasiveness. And the only exception was the ability to address opposing views, which was close to significant but not strongly so. And that is the premise for this sub-argument. And the conclusion is, therefore, the debate intervention improves multiple quality aspects of oral argumentation. So the main argument for the argument quality is first we have three premises. That is also the conclusion of the three sub-arguments. So first one is MLM analysis was used to evaluate whether the intervention affected argument quality. The second one, the debate intervention improves multiple quality aspects of written argumentation. And the third one is the debate intervention improves multiple quality aspects of oral argumentation. And the conclusion for this main argument is the debate interventions has a positive impact on the quality of participants' written and oral arguments. And before finishing my part, it's important to note that the arguments in this part, also in section 6 in the research, are logically strong, because when we look at the true premise test, because all the premises are based directly on the study results and statistical data, so they are factually true. And for the proper form test, the conclusions of these follow logically from these premises, and improvements in structural elements and argument quality directly support the overall conclusion. So therefore, the main arguments in the sections 6.1 and 6.2 are both valid and well supported. So moving on to the next part, Đức will be present.
So today we will walk you through the discussion session of the study. So it will focus on three major sub-arguments and one overarching main argument. So about the first sub-argument, in premise 1, the study stated that the developmental change in structural and quality aspects of written arguments were, and to a large extent, similar to the developmental pattern in student oral arguments output. This means that student improvement in writing closely mirror to their improvement in speaking. It also mentioned that debate intervention facilitated a close connection between two modalities, because students had to speak, justify, and revise their ideas constantly. These skills naturally transfer to writing. Finally, the paper explained that students became more critically aware of the structure and strength of their arguments. Through the repetitive process of presenting, defending, and refining claims, they gradually strengthen both oral and written argument. So therefore, the intervention student managed to produce the qualitatively better written and oral argument. In sub-argument 2, the author explained that the intervention students significantly use more data both in the oral and written productions. That means more data means more evidence, more example, and more factual support. They also highlight that students' arguments became more complex, more sophisticated, and more logically organized. It means that they are trying to show the better arrangement of ideas, clearer claims, and also strong relationship between points. Finally, this part does mean premise 3. The paper states that the intervention group employed more packing in the post-its, and up to the use of packing increased strength of the arguments. It shows that using backings means explaining why the warrants is appropriate, and which deepen very deep into the overall reasoning. So let's conclude that by this mini conclusion of this sub-argument 2, that students develop a deeper sense of how to elaborate and strengthen their arguments by supporting them with more data, sub-arguments, warrants, and also the backings. Next part is the sub-argument 3. The third sub-argument focuses on the development of critical thinking. On the premise 1, the article reports that the intervention students significantly raised more counter-arguments and refuted them into the post-it. You can easily see that this shows that students were able to recognize the opposing view and respond it away very effectively. It's also not for you that respond to counter arguments is recognized as an indicator of a writer's rhetorical and reasoning competences. So being able to answer the objection signal is more advanced thinking. Finally, the studies also point out the idea that the use of qualifications could lead to more acceptable claim. Each qualified, such as in most cases or under certain conditions, make an argument, make, make your own argument more precise and less absolute. So wrap up, we get the idea that student gains a more sophisticated understanding of good reasoning as demonstrated by the increased use of counter-arguments, refutation, and also qualifiers. So you can see that all three sub-arguments support one central argument about the first premise of this overall argument. Debate improve both writing and speaking skill because students develop parallel patterns in both modalities. About the main two premise that debate deepens argument structure by encouraging the use of data, sub-arguments, warrant, and backing. And the last premise is debate enhance critical thinking through counter arguments, refutation, and appropriate qualifier. So come up to the main conclusion of this part that debate interventions impact in a positive way on a number of structural and quality aspects of argumentative comprehension of the interventions participants written and oral argument. This is my part, so let's come to the next persons.
All right, moving to the next part, I'm going to talk about the research directions and limitations. For the research directions, this is argument, main argument of the research direction that I'm going to analyze it. And let's start with the sub-argument, the first sub-argument. So the first premise is this study had also made a case for implicit instruction in fostering second language argumentative skills. The second premise is this study had also made a case for implicit instruction in fostering L2 argumentative skills. Nonetheless, it could be interesting and worth investigating whether implicit instruction about the different structure and query aspect of argumentation would furthermore promote the obtained gains. And the conclusion for sub-argument number 1 is future research should investigate whether implicit instruction can further enhance the gains achieved through implicit instructions. The second sub-argument is The first premise is it would be also interesting to investigate to what extent improvement in L2 argumentation impact different dimensions of L2 writing and speaking skills. Second premise is finding links between high-order thinking, argumentation, and language developments could have important implication for the pedagogy of L2 or foreign language learning and teaching. The conclusion for sub-argument number 2 is future research should examine how gain in L2 argumentation affect other L2 skill because such links have significant pedagogical implication. And moving to the third sub-argument, the first premise is future research would benefit from investigating the linguistic features, including lexical, syntactical, and stylistic features that characterize strong arguments. Second premise is this research is likely to afford us to with through and that can inform us of how to effectively instruct argumentation. So researchers should examine the linguistic features of strong argument to improve the effectiveness of argumentation instructions. And come to the main argument, the conclusion of the first premise. Future research should investigate whether implicit instruction can further enhance the gains achieved through implicit instruction. Second premise, future research should examine how gain in L2 argumentation affect other L2 skills because such links have significant pedagogical implication. Third premise is researchers should examine the linguistic features of strong arguments to improve the effectiveness of argumentation instruction. And the conclusion for the main argument is future research on L2 argumentation is necessary and valuable for improving both theoretical understanding and pedagogical practice. About the research limitation, I found an argument here is the current study has some noteworthy limitations which open up avenues for future research. And this is a sub-argument for the argument. The first premise is we have only analyzed one oral and one written task of each participant. Second premise is future research could benefit from listing and analyzing more data per participant. This would yield more fine-grained insight into the argumentative competence of participants. So the future research should list it and analyze more data per participant. About the second sub-argument, the first premise is although the current study provides robust empirical evidence on the effect of debate pedagogy on L2 argumentation skills. Second premise is a delay post-test could have provide additional insight into long-term effect of intervention. The conclusion for the second sub-argument is future research should include a delay post-test to examine long-term effect. About the third sub-argument, third premise is one of the potential benefits of developing L2 argumentation skill is empowering L2 learners to improve to produce good argumentative essays. Second premise is through this research suggests that the interventions that students honed their ability to produce structurally complex and qualitatively well-reasoned arguments. The third premise is this does not conclusively indicate that this student will be going to correspondingly produce better argumentative exercise as lead in terms of argumentation, which are longer pieces of writing and whose production is more complex and demanding. The conclusion for the third sub-argument is the future research should investigate whether gains in argumentation transfer to the production of full argumentative exercise. About the fourth sub-argument, the first premise is the current study tracks the effect of debate on argumentation development in an argumentative task, which seem more than warranted. The second premise is it would be useful to examine the effect of debate pedagogy on argumentation with changes other than argumentative writing to gain insight into transferability of the effects. The conclusion for the fourth sub-argument is the future research should examine debate pedagogy across multiple genres to determine gender independent effects. About the main argument, we have the first premise is future research should elicit and analyze more data per participant. Second premise is future research should include a delay post-test to examine long-term effects. A third premise is future research should investigate whether gains in argumentation transfer to the production of full argumentative exercise. The fourth premise is future research should examine debate pedagogy across multiple changes to determine gender independent effects. And the final conclusion is future research is necessary to address the current study limitations and fully understand the scope, durability, and the transferability of the debate pedagogy effect on L2 argumentations. Let's come to the last part is about the conclusion. I found a argument here is we hope that the finding of this study would stimulate L2 instructors to consider employing in-class debates on regular basis in their teaching practice. We believe that in-class debate needs to become an integral part of L2 or foreign language curriculum. Debates are a teaching tool. We are credited and welcomed by students and hold the potential for honing other skills, including L2 language skills. About the first sub-argument, we have the first premise is the present study stake are a case for effectiveness of L2 in class debates, which proves to offer fertile ground for honing L2 argumentation skill and metacognitive knowledge of argumentation. Second premise is the debate intervention in the present study has improved a number of aspects of argument structure and quality of the invention group. And the conclusion of first sub-argument is pedagogically, this study had not only testified to the effectiveness of L2 debate as a vehicle to develop student L2 argumentative skills. The second sub-argument, the first premise I found is after the invention, the debater display a marked tendency to diversify their arguments with sophisticated structure components. Second premise is they tend to bolster their positions with strong and well-grounded evidence. Highlight is linked to claims, hedge the strengths of their claims, and anticipate potential counter arguments and pinpoint inadequacies in them. And the conclusion for sub-argument number 2 is the debate invention in the present study had improved a number of aspects of argument structure and quality of the invention group. About the third sub-argument, I found the first premise is this characteristic includes the presence of an authentic audience, opponent, classmate, and the teacher, competitive environment that prompts students to engage in rich negotiation, linkage, and interplay between written and oral argumentation, and engagement in systematic and sustained practice. The second premise is argumentation lies at the heart of education in general. The conclusion for this sub-argument is this had also shed light on many pedagogical features that can presumably even stimulate scaffolding and refining reason skill beyond the L2 context. So we come to the main argument. The first premise is the present study stake out a case for the effectiveness of L2 in class debates, which proved to offer fertile ground for honing L2 argumentation skill and metacognitive knowledge of argumentation. Second premise is the debate invention in present study had improved a number of aspects of argument structure and quality of the invention group. The last premise is it had also shed light on many pedagogical features that can presumably even stimulate scaffolding and refining reasoning skill beyond the L2 context. And the final conclusion for this argument is in-class debate needs to become an integral part for L2 and foreign language curriculum. And that is the end of our presentation. Thank you for listening.